Hey folks, good to see you all today. Hope you're doing well. This is Joshua. I'm the outreach coordinator for Beckdorf and Bronson here on the West Coast. Wanted to do today some preparations for the weather that is coming. Now, right now, where I am, just a little bit south of Seattle, it is still a little cold and it's rainy, but we've had a string of really great weather. And maybe if you're down amongst our friends, either in Florida or Georgia, Georgia where our other roastery is, in Florida where Brendan has his lab, the weather's probably better, right? It's sunny. It's sunny all year round, maybe. So maybe it's always cold brew season. But here in the Northwest, we definitely have a season of cold brew, and it does begin now. It begins when the sun starts coming out and we start spending a little more time outside. So today, hi Heather, good to see you. Thanks for showing up. You're going to notice a little bit of an odd configuration because I do have several demos to do, and you'll see me looking away from the screen pretty regularly. That's mostly just because I have this demo setup area down here that I'm going to continue to reference to, right? So what I'll do right now is I'll actually pop that up here so you can see it. So if something's going on the demo, it's still visible. We're going to go through 3 different methods for producing cold brew. And first off, Eric, good to see you. First off, it's good to have some nomenclature, some names properly, right? So when we talk about cold brew, what folks are often thinking of is coffee on ice, and that's absolutely correct, coffee on ice. However, there are a couple ways to get there. It used to be that we spent a lot of time taking hot coffee and putting it on ice. Now that doesn't necessarily make for the most flavorful cup of coffee, but we are going to experiment with a way to do that today. It will be the last method that we go over using a Chemex, and that's really called iced coffee. We really want to get particular about it. Then when we talk about cold brew, we actually mean a fundamentally different thing, and the term cold brew says it all, cold brewing. Although, if we want to get pedantic about it, we would probably actually call it ambient brew or room temperature brew, because we're not using cold water, we're using room temperature water. So the great thing about this is that there are tools like I have set up right here, which are made specifically to make cold brew coffee. And then we're also going to show a way today that you can, using probably some of the things you have in your home, perform the same function. And that's making a true cold brew, which is an extraction of coffee using ambient water, room temperature water, really, to take time, have time be the main function in the extraction of that coffee. We know there's a relationship between heat, time, and pressure when we're pulling all the things out of coffee that we want to taste. The hotter the water, or if we add pressure like espresso, the faster we can extract those solubles that we want, correct? And in this case, since we're not using hot water, we're going to use time, right? There is, of course, a different cup of coffee that comes out of this. Often folks talk about a cold brew coffee as having more body. Maybe the acidity is a little less pronounced, right? And when we talk about acidity, we don't mean the actual pH. We're talking about the experience that we have, the sensual element of the coffee on the palate. And Ryan jumps in and asks the question I want to get to really quicker. What's the difference between cold brew versus cooling off coffee taste-wise? Great question. So that process of using cold water and time to extract qualities from the coffee. First off, caffeine, right off the bat, super water soluble, hot, cold. It's going to come out really quick in the process. So our caffeine comes out relatively fast with hot brewing, or in this case, cold brewing. The other elements, though, for flavor, those are going to come out at different times and in different volumes. There are some qualities of the coffee which we cannot unlock with cold brewing, no matter how long we allow it to sit, right? But sometimes those are more of the really high bright notes, those citrus qualities. Linda, and we love doing them for you. Thanks. Linda says she loves watching these. We love doing them. So in this case, that's why people often talk about that cold brew coffee is having more body, more of that mouthfeel, that bigness in it, and less of the brightness, what we call acidity on the palate. And that's simply because the cold brew method is not able to pull those things out, because those do require a temperature component. However, the amount of time we spend allowing the water to sit in immersion does bring out lots of lovely notes. Often when I drink cold brew, I think a lot more of like chocolate, roasted nuts, those kinds of qualities, caramel maybe, some of those that we do associate with body. So, great question, and let's talk about some different ways to do this. So I'm gonna switch over to this first method that I have here. Now this uses what we call a Filtron brewer. I want to talk about the components really quick. And as I talk about these components, you can probably think about the fact that a lot of these things, although this is specially designed, you can probably find something similar to them in your home. So this first part here is actually where the coffee is going to sit, the ground coffee is going to sit. And on top of it sits this container for the water. And it has in the bottom of it a very thin hole, which you can probably see. So it allows the water to drip down slowly. And the water will drip down in about 45 minutes into the bed of coffee, which is in here, fully saturating it, and then it will sit for 24 hours. Now, I'm going to show you something here which folks who've used these before are going to laugh to themselves and chuckle, because we've all made this mistake. We've often, we have this hole in the bottom, which is how we're going to decant the coffee later. Well, we need to plug that up. It comes with this nice little cork. I'll just put it in right here. Well, folks who haven't done this, but who are smarter than I am, recognize the problem with that. If we put the cork in this way, of course, then we can't get to it because we're about to put coffee and water in here. And I've done it. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. So remember, the cork comes in from the bottom. Put it in pretty snug. Give it a good press. The next thing that's special with this method are these cotton filtration pots, which sit inside the base here. That sits over the area where the hole is and where the cork is, and that adds an additional layer of filtration. And now, not necessary, but nice to also do, is to use a paper filter, right? So again, because this is going to sit for quite a long time and it's a relatively coarse grind, we're going to get, much like with French press, a lot of sediment, right? A lot of materials that come out with this coffee. And so we want to be able to filter them out when it comes time to decant that lovely thick cold brew. Now, I'm going to add a pound of coffee here. Now this, in this case, is a Vesuvio blend, a slightly darker roast that we make. And this is what we use in our stores for cold brew. And I will show you just a second here really quick. It's a pretty coarse grind. You can see the particles even from that distance, right? Remember, when you're getting coffee on our website, you can actually tell us how you'd like the coffee ground, right? We have a row of beautiful, clean Malkonig grinders that production staff uses every day. They clean them beautifully and thoroughly. They keep the burrs nice and sharp and tuned, and they can grind your coffee for you before it goes out the door. So if you want to try brewing some cold brew at home and you don't have a brew grinder, we can of course always help you with that. So the next thing that goes on here is this little dispersion screen, right? And so it's raised up a little bit. You'll see there's a bit of a gap between where it sits and the bed of coffee. That's because as the water flows down in here, the coffee is going to rise up and touch that, and as it touches it, it kind of constrains the bed a little bit. So the next step with this method is pretty simple. You simply fill the water into the top here, and there are two little demarcations which you can barely see, and you can use a 3/4 of a pound or a full pound, and it gives you different volumes. I'm not going to do this just right now because I'm going to brew this up for later so that we can use it to make some espresso cocktails. But I will say that we will talk just a little bit about these. These are kind of the basic numbers for the Filtron method. So what I want to point out is that we're using a pound of coffee with 1,600 milliliters of water, approximately 7 cups. And then that sits for 18 to 24 hours. Again, there it is. It's that time, which is the element there. And just so I know that it was kind of hard to see those, I made a little image of that. We can talk about it really quick. So the Filtron uses that slow brewing method, but notice right off the bat here, something special. Down at the bottom, I have 1 to 3. That's the ratio of coffee. 1 gram of coffee, 1 part coffee to 3 parts water, right? I mean, it's actually a relatively low. Often we talk about 1 to 17. We're talking about grams in this case. For standard brewing, 1 to 17. So what does that mean? That means that we're using a relatively small amount of water proportional to the coffee that we're brewing with, right? So so that means that we're going to come up with a very thick, literally thick coffee. It's a concentrate. It creates a concentrate. The great thing about that is that you can then use that to make all sorts of different types of drinks. I know Brendan did some on a cast last week. We're going to do some more coming up here next week after I've brewed up my coffee. And the great thing about it is I can do them next week, because another great thing about this concentrate we make with this method is that it actually allows us to hold it for quite a while. You can hold on to your coffee that you make through Filtron as an extraction or through the method we're about to do here for 2 or 3 weeks refrigerated. So just remember that element is we do have to refrigerate. That concentrate in order for it to stay in order for the quality to stay there. But you can hold on to it for quite a while, 2 to 3 weeks. So let's say you don't actually have a Filtron brewer. That's fine. There are other ways, possibly with some things that you already have in your home. I do want to get to Ryan again. Best setting for the Breville grinder. So I don't have the Breville settings right in front of me. We shared an image yesterday. I might be able to have one of the producers pull it up. But it's going to be a coarse setting for the method I'm about to show you, and for the Filtron. It's going to be about as coarse as you can get it on your Breville. And if you're calling into us and having us grind your coffee, it's an 11. But you can just tell the folks, or you can just put that in. It has the settings there for you when you make it. Yeah, it is pandemic style. It's definitely a way to make your coffee for the future. So what do I have set up here now? Let's take a look at this. So we'll get rid of that. Bye-bye, Filtron. So what am I setting up here? So some things you have in your home. A French press, right? Now I'm going to do the ratios again for this really quick. And I'll show you what we're doing here with these is, again, this is also a pretty concentrated coffee, 1 to 4. We're going to use 150 grams of coffee, about 12 tablespoons, 600 grams of water. And the great thing about using grams is that you can usually use your standard measuring cup, which has milliliters on it, and a milliliter is equal to a gram of a gram. So in this case, we're going to use 150 grams of coffee. I wanted to just do a demo because I wasn't sure, and so we're going to learn this together. I'm going to use this scoop here that I have, and I'm going to count out till I get to 150 into this French press here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody count together. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm going to stand up here to get a little bit of angle on this. That's 15, 16, and 18. Actually, I was off on the tablespoon count, although this might be less than a tablespoon in the scoop here. Okay, there we are. So you can go ahead and give that a little bit of a shake there. And now, this is the easy part. So 600 grams of water here, and it goes right in. Now, as with any French press, we're always going to do a little extra agitation, right? You see there's a really strong proportion of coffee to water in this, right? Now, just like with a French press, we'll go ahead and press that down just slightly to submerge the body underneath the mass of coffee underneath the water. Now, again, just like with the other method, that will sit for 18 to 24 hours, right? And then the one additional step here, so we take a look at this here. We have 600 grams of water, 150 grams of coffee, 18 to 24 hours, a 1-to-4 ratio. The additional step here, which I have not tried yet in this seated position, but we're going to give it a go, is the additional pouring. So, do you guys want me to do that? Because I might make a mess. But I'm okay to do it if you want me to see me do it. What I've done here with I have a standard strainer here, right? And then I've just clipped on some cheesecloth. I happen to have cheesecloth in the drawers of the kitchen. I put the cheesecloth over the top of the strainer and use a funnel to go right into this jar here. Now, when the time comes, you would simply, press down your coffee. It's going to be really strong. It's going to be really hard, but it's not going to be like, the usual method, right? And you can see I'm already making a mess myself here. So even with the metal filtration that the French press has in it naturally, and with the addition of the cheesecloth, you can see what happens there, the dyeing that occurs with the coffee. It's still going to be a relatively soluble, full amount of extract with this method, and the difference being that we don't have that really thick puck that goes in the bottom of the filtron. That little cotton puck that the filtron has really does a lot of work to strain out the cold brew. But this is a perfectly good way to make cold brew coffee, just with those tools that you would have at home. So we're going to do one last method. Now this gets back to the point that I made about the naming of these things. What we just did was 2 different types of cold brew. We used room temperature water in full immersion with the coffee for a long period of time, 18 to 24 hours. and that produces a very specific type of coffee, big in body in the mouth, big feel, it coats the palate. It's a lovely experience, and it's great for mixing and blending, and it's also nice because it's a concentrate, right? So it's a really, you can use very small amounts. So there's another way to do this, which is not actually cold brew, but we call it iced coffee, really. And specifically, we're going to be using a Chemex. Of course, the one thing which I forgot here was my hot water. Welcome to production pickups. I'll be right back. Look at this lovely Chemex on the screen while I'm away, and give me just a second. And I'm back. The magic of television, right? Okay. Sorry about that, folks. So, in this methodology, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be using ice as we brew. And the trick is that we're actually going to use the ice as a proportion of the total liquid that we would usually make our coffee with. So, if you've been watching Brendan do pour overs or Ben, we talk about the proportion of water to coffee when we do our brewing. And there's an ideal number. It ranges between 1 to 15 to 1 to 17. In this case, unlike the other methods, we are going to shoot for a 1 to 17 method. But see the difference there? I'm going to also include ice as the total brew volume. So the total brew volume is going to be 1 to 17. But I'm actually only going to be brewing with a 1 to 10. And I'll explain that more as we go through this, right? So I have ice, I have my Chemex, I have a scale, and I have coffee as well. So a way to think about this is that when we are brewing coffee, we have an ideal amount of coffee that touches the water, right? In order to extract the things we want out of that coffee. Right? So like any pour over method, we're going to go ahead and wet our filter. Right? Pour that off. I know that yesterday Brendan was very very kind, and for your benefit, he actually tasted the paper water, the paper filter water. Why do we do that? We want to rinse that filter so that we can remove any of the paper elements that are in it. Now we're going to start by actually putting ice directly into our Chemex here. So I'm going to go ahead and tear this down. And the recipe that I'm following here is that I'm going to have 250 grams of ice, I'm going to have 35 grams of coffee, and then I'm going to add 350 grams of water, hot water, just like a standard brew, and let that hot coffee brew down onto the ice. And as the hot water hits the ice, it melts it and it cools the coffee down. And the issue here is it's a really quick cooling. Overall, if you add 350 grams of water, 250 grams of ice, which is also water, you'll see that those amounts compared to 35 gets us to 1 to 17 total. However, the actual amount of water being used for the brew, those 350 grams of water, that's only 1 to 10. So in order to compensate for that, I've done one thing. I've actually I've decreased the size slightly of my almost. grind, right? I've gone a little bit finer just to kind of make up for that. All right, they were at 250. Great. I put my filter back in. Remember, when you're doing a Chemex, to always put the thicker side, the side that is comprised of 3 layers, against the spout. Okay. Tear again. So right now I'm at 8. Now I'm going to add my coffee. And then we're going to brew the same way that we always do brew, right? We always start with a little bit of a bloom. So we add some water. You can see the bubbling starting, right? A little bit more there. We wait for about 30 seconds. So again, this is brewing coffee with hot water, just like you brew it every morning when you do a pour over. The only thing we're doing is we're trading out part of the water we're brewing with the ice. Now we can begin our process here. There's one other little thing I'm going to do here, and I'm going to pour about half of the water I need. And then I'm going to pour again to get up to my total brew volume of. And I'm going to do something I usually don't do here. I'm going to actually agitate it slightly. And again, I've decreased the grind size a little bit. I've made the grind a little bit finer, just in order to compensate for the fact that I'm actually using a relatively low water to coffee ratio for the actual brewing method. So then, in order to also help with that, I'm going to speed the saturation slightly by doing that little bit of agitation. Not a lot. Often the way we agitate, is we do a little spin there, right? And that also brings the coffee off of the sides of the container. Okay. Is there any questions here from folks? Yep, Vesuvio has been listed in there. Vesuvio is great. And Ben also has the Chemex listed in there. That's great. I love the Chemex. If there's any other questions there, Ryan, down to my last 6 cups. I've had a Decatur soon. Oh, that's good. Well, the folks in Decatur will be so happy to see you. I will tell you. If you have any questions, Ryan, you're going to get some coffee. Just shoot them over here to the Facebook page. We're monitoring it pretty religiously. So if you have any questions, we can hopefully ask them. Get those answered for you. Indeed, yeah. Dancing Goats makes great iced coffee. Ryan just made that point. I think that it's true. It's the great thing about Dancing Goats as a blend. And if you saw Ben's conversation about blends on Monday, and if you listened to Bob on Tuesday when we did that cupping, blends are unique in that they are able to bring out qualities of different coffees to really make a balanced cup. And one aspect of Dancing Goats is we do put a portion of a coffee in there which is roasted slightly more than the other coffees. So by no means would we ever call it a dark roast, but that little bit of darkness in there, that portion of it that is a darker roast, gives it this sweetness, and that always shows up, I think, in any of the methods that we use to brew, whether it's espresso with your drip machine at home, or in a cold brewing method. We often, I think, one of our tendencies in our company is that we do tend towards darker coffee profiles for making these iced coffees. But I'll tell you this, when we have a lovely Yirgacheffe or Harar, African coffees make amazing cold brew coffee. I will probably get some next week to do that, and so that when we do some more of these cold brew cocktails, we'll be able to use those African coffees with some different ingredients. And the first thing I think of with our Harar would be blueberries, like mashing up some blueberries and maybe some rosemary to make a nice cold brew cocktail with that. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. And I see Kristen. Good to see you, Kristen. Whirling Dervish or Dancing Goats, our go-to for cold brew. And there we have it again. Whirling Dervish, another blend with a component of dark slightly higher than Dancing Goats. And the way that that shows up in that coffee is like cherry, like something I always think of whenever I drink Whirling Dervish, which is our organic fair trade coffee. I always think of that as having a cherry quality to it. So here we have. Folks, thank you so much for joining me today. It's Thursday. Tomorrow, end of the week, Ben is going to be talking about gooseneck kettles tomorrow. I want to remind everyone, thank you for tuning in. And if you need coffee, I know that some folks are able to go to our stores. That's awesome. Please do. The staff there are working really hard. And we've done a really good job of moving pretty quickly to change up our business model in order to still be there for our friends and our family in the coffee community. So by all means, visit our stores in Atlanta, in Olympia. Those folks, I got to visit our downtown store the other day. It was really great to see everyone. So please do. If you are not able to visit the stores, then please, I invite you to try some of the coffees that have been listed in the comments here. The Vesuvio, it's a great coffee to try this with. If you want to start experimenting with making cold brew with different methods at home, you can always ask questions. I want to remind everyone too that we have a coupon code. I'm going to put it on the screen here for you, right in front of my face. Look at that. There it is. So it's there it is. There it is. Watch and Learn 10. Watch and Learn 10 is the code that you can use when you go online to order coffee. And actually, that 10% will be applied to your entire order. So I hope that you do that. We love hearing from you. We love participating in these daily demos, 9 a.m. every day. And then Brendan is going to be back here on Saturday at 4 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, I believe, doing a demo for you all this weekend. We're really having a great time spending time with you doing these. And so thank you for showing up every day. Tomorrow, again, Ben with the gooseneck kettles, and we'll see you this weekend as well. And then take this off my face here, shall we? And then we'll get back with you next week while we continue this conversation of how we all make our homes into cafes. Take care. It's always good being with you. Have a great Thursday.